Hey everybody, today I'm going to show you a tip on how you can do some amazing binding at home and get really nice professional results. Now, as you know, we have a lot of industrial machines. We're kind of spoiled in our shop here at Discovery Trekking, and this is a 5-thread, or was a 5-thread, top and bottom cover stitch that we've modified with just one needle and one looper on the bottom to create a binding that we use on a lot of necklines and arms. I'm going to show you this machine to show you what we do, but I'm then going to go over to one of our industrial straight stitch machines and show you how you can get really great results doing basically a very simple technique. Now, I've cut my own binding. It's 1 3/4 inches, and it's just a stretchy, light lycra spandex nylon or spandex poly, I'm not exactly sure. And it goes through this industrial binding folder. I just gotta get her set up here. I put red thread on just so that you can see the resulting stitch. Okay, and I'm going to just stretch it a little bit so it doesn't gather. Okay, now I'm going to stop this and show you that we get a lovely binding, and that also, because it's measured and folded, it's exactly right, and we get a little bit of a chain stitch on the back. Tension actually needs adjusting on this machine. Now I'm going to take this exact same piece of fabric, which is Polartec Winpro Stretch. So this is a really lovely stretch both directions, water repellent and warm fabric that we would use for hoodies or pants or many other things. And I'm going to take it over to our industrial straight stitch, where I have to find a piece of binding. Hang on just one moment. I need a piece of binding to show you this. So I'm going to cut it out of the other machine. Okay. So again, I have 1 3/4 inch binding. It doesn't actually matter that you have this width of binding, because when you're doing binding, you're the one who decides how wide you want it to be. Now what I'm going to do is, this is the right side of the fabric, and I'm going to put the right side of the binding on the edge of the fabric. And the important thing when you bind is that you can actually see the edge of your fabric. It isn't the edge of the binding that matters, it's the edge of the fabric, because that's going to measure exactly how wide that binding is. Now, if I wanted to do a very narrow binding, I would just basically let my foot follow along on the edge of my fabric. But in this case, I'm going to kind of match up what I just did over there, and I'm going to move it over to a 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to just make sure my fabric, not my binding, follows the 1/2 inch line. So it's okay if I can see my fabric a little bit showing through. So I'm going to now just follow that line sewing. I have a 1/2 inch line right on the template here. Okay, and I'm not going to go too terribly far. Stop there. And then we're going to fold it over to the wrong side. And I know a lot of people would then pin it to make sure that you're covering up the stitch line, because we're going to be securing this from the right side. But I just basically fold it over and give it a bit of a tug, and I can feel that it's secure. I'm going to place that underneath my foot, and now I'm going to run, whoops, I want this to be right in the middle of my foot, and this part of my foot I'm going to eyeball all the way along so that I'm catching the fabric on the other side. Now, this used to be called stitch in the ditch, but actually I'm not in the ditch exactly. I'm right on my fabric with this machine. This foot is allowing me to continue to sew on the fabric, not in what we call the ditch, which is the area between the binding and the fabric that you're sewing it to. So I'm just sewing along, and then I stop, and I have a nice finish. That's a nice look, but the back isn't going to be great. In this case, you could leave it. It's not too terribly wide. But if I were making a narrow binding, like I just did in this piece here, I had a lot of fabric left over at the back. It was way down to here, so I trimmed it. This is where I'm going to show you the trick to trimming. When you trim from the wrong side, don't trim with your, these are applique scissors, by the way, they go flat against the fabric. Don't trim here with the binding on your left side because you stand a chance of actually cutting into your thread. Instead, bind from here. Now I don't have much to work with. I'm actually going to show you a better example just in 1 second where I'm leaving a whole lot more. But you can just go along and trim. And you can make a much neater edge if you left a larger piece. So I'm going to just quickly do that for you. Right? I'm going to make this one a thin binding. And I'm just going to do the width of my foot. I'm going to fold it over by hand. I'm going to stitch almost in the ditch, but I'm following the foot, the right part of my foot along the edge of the black binding. And you'll see I have a lot of fabric left on the other side, and I'm not going to trim this way. I'm going to turn it this way, lift the fabric, and just tug it as I trim. And if you do this technique, tugging as you trim, you'll get a nice close line that's got a nice edge to it, and then you have a nice finish on the front and the back. And that's my little tip today for making your own binding and trimming your garments.